Imagine a small patrol boat challenging one of the most powerful warships on Earth, a ship so large that it carries more firepower than some entire navies. Now imagine that this confrontation wasn't an accident. Venezuela actually chose to move toward a U.S. aircraft carrier, believing they could force it to change direction. What happened next turned into one of the most tense moments in the Caribbean Sea. This is where our story begins. It all started on a hot afternoon, with the sea unusually calm and the sky perfectly clear. The U.S. Navy's aircraft carrier strike group was moving through international waters on a routine freedom of navigation mission. For the carrier crew, it was supposed to be a standard day. Aircraft launches, radar checks, communication drills, nothing out of the ordinary. None of them expected that within minutes, every pair of eyes on the bridge would be locked onto a single radar contact approaching from the south, fast. That contact was a Venezuelan patrol ship pushing directly toward the carrier's path. At first, the U.S. crew thought it was simply passing by. There was nothing uncommon about local vessels moving around in those waters, but this ship didn't adjust its course. It didn't slow down, it didn't even try to maintain a safe distance. Instead, it came closer and closer to Oficinarum, as if it had a purpose. On the Venezuelan side, officers believed they were defending their territory. They had been told that foreign ships were violating waters that Venezuela claimed as their own. Whether those claims were legally true or not didn't matter to the crew on board. They were following orders. Inside the carrier's command center, the atmosphere slowly changed from relaxed to alert. Officers began monitoring every move the Venezuelan ship made. Communication specialists listened carefully for radio messages. Pilots on standby checked their gear, just in case they were needed sooner than expected. No one wanted trouble, but no one was going to take risks either. An aircraft carrier is not just a ship, it is a symbol. It carries jets, weapons, thousands of sailors, and decades of naval reputation. Any threat toward it, even a small one, has to be taken seriously. When the Venezuelan ship finally sent its first radio call, the message was sharp. The U.S. carrier must change its course immediately. For a moment, everyone in the room froze. Demanding an aircraft carrier to alter course is almost unheard of. Still, the U.S. Navy responded professionally, explaining that they were in international waters and would continue on their planned route. But instead of accepting the response, the Venezuelan ship came even closer, almost as if testing the carrier's limits. On the Venezuelan bridge, some officers were confident, others were nervous. They knew exactly what kind of ship they were approaching. A vessel protected by destroyers, cruisers, submarines, and aircraft ready to launch with just one signal. And yet, they kept moving forward. The Venezuelan patrol ship kept closing the distance, and the tension in the air rose with every passing second. It wasn't a normal kind of approach. Usually, small regional ships maintain space when they see a U.S. carrier strike group, mainly because the size difference alone is intimidating. But this ship acted differently. It angled its bow directly toward the carrier's forward path, trying to send a message. On the U.S. bridge, officers watched calmly but with increasing focus. The carrier's captain didn't need to give a speech. Everyone already understood how unusual this situation was becoming. A single wrong maneuver could turn an ordinary day into an international incident. As the Venezuelan vessel came even closer, U.S. sailors could see it clearly on the horizon. Its movement sharp, almost aggressive. The destroyer position nearest to the carrier shifted slightly, taking up a protective shadow position. That is the unspoken rule in a carrier strike group. The carrier never faces threats alone. Its escort ships move like a shield, adjusting to whatever appears in the environment. On radar monitors, the Venezuelan ship's signature blinked larger as it advanced, and the radios crackled again with another firm message, demanding that the Americans change course. It was unusual confidence for a vessel that, compared to the carrier group, looked almost tiny. Inside the U.S. carrier's Combat Information Center, intelligence officers reviewed everything. The Venezuelan ship's history, its typical behavior, its reported commanders, and any recent political statements that could explain this sudden boldness. Meanwhile, flight deck crews started preparing jets, not for attack, but for readiness. In situations like these, the Navy doesn't simply react. They prepare multiple layers of response. Pilots were already climbing into their aircraft, running checks, staying alert for the moment they might be ordered to launch. Even though everyone hoped it wouldn't come to that, the atmosphere had shifted from routine to serious. On the Venezuelan side, the crew felt a mixture of emotions. Some believed this was their chance to show strength. Others wondered if they were pushing too far. They knew who they were facing. They knew the firepower of a carrier group, the radar systems, the aircraft, the escort destroyers, the tracking sensors, all of it. But turning back now would make their earlier demands look empty. And so their ship maintained its course, refusing to drift away or slow down. The message was clear. They wanted the Americans to see their determination. With both sides holding their positions, the ocean became strangely quiet, as if waiting for the next move. No one fired a weapon, no one shouted threats, but actions speak louder than words. And the Venezuelan ship's decision to approach so boldly forced the U.S. Navy to prepare for the exact moment the situation could escalate. Both crews knew they were stepping into dangerous territory, and the confrontation was far from over. The moment the Venezuelan ship attempted to block the aircraft carrier's path, the U.S. Navy initiated its standard response protocol, and things started moving very quickly. First came repeated radio warnings, but loud and clear, telling the Venezuelan crew to change course immediately. But the patrol ship ignored the warnings, continuing to hold its line. That's when the real power of a carrier strike group became obvious. Fighter jets on standby launched into the air, not to attack but to demonstrate the sheer reach and speed of the U.S. military. From above, these jets swooped past, creating a visual warning that was impossible to ignore. Even from the carrier deck, the sight of jets forming a tight defensive pattern sent a clear message. This is not a ship to be trifled with. Meanwhile, the escort destroyers moved in tighter formations, creating a protective screen around the carrier. Their radar and weapon systems were fully active, scanning the patrol ship for any sudden movement. Subtle shifts in the destroyer's positioning made it clear that the carrier was prepared to respond to any aggressive act within seconds. On board the carrier, officers remained calm, speaking in measured tones, but everyone knew the seriousness of the situation. An aircraft carrier is not just a floating city, it is a symbol of unmatched power, and the Navy trains relentlessly to ensure that symbol is never challenged successfully. On the Venezuelan vessel, the mood started to change. At first, the crew believed their boldness would be enough to make the Americans back down. But as the jets circled overhead and the destroyers adjusted their positions, doubt began to creep in. Officers whispered nervously, glancing at one another, realizing that their little patrol ship was facing a threat it could never match directly. The sheer scale of the U.S. force became impossible to ignore. Jets in the sky, destroyers to either side, radar monitoring every move, and the carrier itself, massive and imposing, plowing forward with confidence. Despite the tension, the U.S. Navy maintained complete control. No weapons were fired, no aggressive maneuvers were needed beyond positioning and show of force. Every movement was calculated, every action measured. The strategy was clear. Demonstrate power without provoking unnecessary conflict. It was a masterclass in naval deterrence, showing how overwhelming strength can prevent escalation simply through presence and readiness. The Venezuelan crew quickly realized they were outmatched, and even though they still attempted to maintain composure, it was obvious that they could not physically force the carrier to change its course. By the time the carrier passed safely through the area, the patrol ship had retreated slightly, recognizing the limits of its options. The situation ended without a single shot fired, yet it left a lasting impression. From above and below the water, the Venezuelan crew had witnessed the full might of a U.S. carrier strike group. They had learned that confronting such a force is not a matter of courage alone. It is a battle you cannot win with small ships or bold gestures. What started as a tense standoff had become a clear demonstration of power and protocol, a reminder that even the most confident actions must consider the reality of who you are confronting and by nothing. After the standoff, the Venezuelan patrol ship slowly backed away, its crew finally realizing the reality of what they were up against. The U.S. aircraft carrier and its strike group continued on their course as if nothing had happened, but the message had been sent loud and clear. No shots were fired, no weapons discharged, Yet the Venezuelan crew had experienced the full scale of a carrier strike group's power. From the massive flight deck above to the destroyers moving in precise formations around them, every element of the group showed why challenging such a force directly was impossible. For the Venezuelans, this encounter became a lesson in the difference between boldness and recklessness, courage and danger. Once the patrol ship retreated to safer waters, both sides resumed their normal operations. The U.S. Navy logged the incident, analyzed the communications, and reviewed all protocols, ensuring that any future encounters would be handled just as professionally. Even though the confrontation had lasted only minutes, it left an impression on both navies. The U.S. had demonstrated that its aircraft carriers are more than just warships. They are symbols of strategic power and deterrence, capable of projecting strength without firing a single shot. On the Venezuelan side, officers returned home with a new understanding of naval limitations and the real consequences of confronting a carrier group. The aftermath also affected regional naval behavior. Other navies in the Caribbean and nearby waters observed the incident closely. It was a powerful reminder that the rules of engagement in international maritime law are serious matters. No single small ship can physically challenge a carrier without inviting overwhelming response. In many ways, this standoff reinforced the importance of strategy, communication, and restraint in naval operations. Bold actions may seem impressive in theory, but when facing a floating fortress like a U.S. carrier, caution is essential. Finally, this incident became a talking point in both military and political circles. Analysts discussed how Venezuela misjudged the situation, overestimating its ability to intimidate a vastly superior force. For the public, it became a story that illustrated the enormous difference in scale, technology, and training between small naval forces and a fully equipped aircraft carrier strike group. And for the U.S. Navy, it was a quiet success, a demonstration that deterrence and readiness can achieve objectives without engaging in conflict. The encounter ended peacefully, but the lessons learned were unforgettable. Venezuela had tested the wrong ship, and in doing so provided a textbook example of how overwhelming power and careful strategy prevent escalation, ensuring safety while maintaining authority in the world's oceans.